Alright, hey everyone, this is Ash. Welcome back to the King's Speech. So a couple of quick things before we dive into the video proper. Some related things from last week, and some for stuff related to this week. So last week I did have the intention of putting out a Spy Family and a channel update video. I had both of them recorded, ready to go. But unfortunately, somewhere during the recording process, the videos got corrupted and I wasn't able to open it. I tried a few different techniques, a few different softwares to try and recover it, see if I could salvage anything. Unfortunately, I couldn't, so I just couldn't end up releasing those videos just because they were completely unreadable, unplayable. So I apologize for that, but unfortunately it's completely out of my hands. Technical glitch. And this weekend I was just too busy with other things. I couldn't get around to recording or re-recording those videos again. That said, next week I will have a long weekend coming up. I'll have a few more extra days off and some time off. So hopefully we'll be able to re-record it next weekend and then put it out at that point. But I just want to mention here, in case anyone was wondering what happened to those videos, why they hadn't showed up on the channel, there was a reason for it. So that's the first kind of item of business. The second item for business is related to this video. I did mention in my last week's video that I wasn't expecting to put out a One Piece video this week, because I kind of expected the plot to kind of drag along a little bit before we got any more potentially interesting developments. But then I saw the spoiler for the end of this week's chapter, and so I figured, since I've been waiting for something like this to happen in the plot, I'd talk about it a little bit. Because I haven't set up the site vlog like intended yet, and because I felt like Twitter thread would be too clunky to kind of get my thoughts across as cohesively as I wanted, I figured I'd just do a quick video kind of talk about my thoughts on the chapter. So with that said, there is some kind of tangentially related thematic stuff I want to bring up and readdress that I've talked about in prior videos as well. So I'm gonna try to keep this video as succinct and precise as possible, and I apologize if it does end up being a little bit long. And then one last thing before we dive into it, you'll probably hear some kind of buzzing, droning sound in the background. I apologize, but it is super hot here for mid-May. It's living upwards of 20 degrees each day this week. My mouse is super hot, so I need the fan on to keep me cool, or else I will die of heat stroke. So apologize for that. That's probably the sound that you heard in the background. I did some test videos that shouldn't drown me out or make anything hard to hear, so it shouldn't be too much of a problem. I just wanted to make sure you understood what exactly the droning sound in the background was. So with that said, let us get into One Piece chapter 1013, Anarchy in the Big Mom. It's such a weird title that doesn't roll off the tongue easily, and I don't really feel like it relates to anything really that happens in the chapter with regards to Big Mom. But that's kind of a minor complaint, nothing really big. It's not a huge deal in the grand scheme. As always, translation credit for Stephen Paul and lettering by Vanessa Satone. So I've seen a lot of fans that were disappointed with the outcome of the Nami Ulti fight. Where everyone kind of thought that Nami's finally gonna get her one-on-one, she's making her stand, and Oda immediately had Big Mom come in and clean up Ulti for her instead. And I'm not gonna lie, it really made me laugh. It was amusing to me, partly because, as I talked about last week, I'm not particularly invested in Nami's development insofar as whatever she's had, whatever fans claim is the development she's had during this arc. And so I feel like fans have been deprived of quality writing and development for Nami for so long that we just kind of expect the bare minimum from Oda at this point. So even the possibility of Nami getting a fight is kind of celebration for One Piece fans, which I kind of feel is like a little disheartening that the bar we have is set so low that, you know, having Nami just fight someone is just kind of like reason for celebration. But like I said, for me, it doesn't really work because there's absolutely no emotional investment in this fight. For me, again, I'm not going to reiterate it. I talked about it last chapter, but Oda really hasn't done a good job of developing an emotional connection between Nami or the citizens of Wano or the overall struggle or the broader themes. I talked about how last week about how there was a failure for Oda to kind of tie it back to Nami's own struggles growing up at Arlong Park and similarities to what the citizens of Wano have gone through, and how that's undercut a lot of the emotional resonance of this arc. So not seeing Nami kind of just get, you know, shuffled to the side really didn't impact me. That said, there's like a few different kind of things related to this I want to just touch upon. I'm trying to gather thoughts and do as succinctly as possible. So one being, I see a lot of debate about whether this is kind of justified or not, because I know a lot of fans are debating whether Nami or Usopp would be, you know, physically powerful enough to even take on Page 1 and Ulti, given like the obvious kind of gap in physical strength between the two groups. And a lot of fans did bring up, you know, the kind of good and solid points that Nami and Usopp, you know, as fighters have always kind of relied more on their ingenuity, you know, tricks, illusions, things like that, to fight rather than, you know, just pure brute physical strength. And so, you know, there's kind of the acknowledgement and the mention that they could have potentially won out even against Nami or Ulti by utilizing tricks and stuff like that. And we've seen like elements of this, you know, with like the fight like Usopp Luffy, where Usopp did use, you know, his ingenuity to his benefit. And there's ways Oda could have also gotten around, like he could have given them some kind of sea stone armor, like Usopp could have used sea stone bullets or sea stone stackles, like he did in Punk Hazard. There's ways Oda could have got around the power gap. So that's one kind of element where it's like, yeah, you know, again, this is a criticism I've brought up before, where the introduction of Haki has kind of unfairly tipped the scales on fights, where before you can kind of justify, you know, certain characters using ingenuity and guile and wits, you know, whatnot, to kind of take out overpowered opponents. But with Haki kind of giving you the physical buff, you know, not just towards your power, but also your defense. And then when you're also taking into consideration that you're fighting zone users who also get like a physical and defensive buff from going into higher performance, like having the animal zones, and then dinosaurs kind of adding another layer to it, there is a kind of a bigger gap between, you know, Nami and Usopp were kind of like the weaker members of the crew, than being able to justifiably take them out just with, you know, their lightning techniques and traps and stuff like that. But given that Usopp awakened his observation Haki in Dressrosa, you know, during a time of turmoil and crisis, there's also like fans have also been expecting that, you know, the rest of the crew would awaken their Haki at some point. And I feel like this is like, I know the arc's not over, there's still a chance for it to happen, blah blah blah, but it still feels like there's been a missed opportunity thus far for Nami or the others to start awakening their Haki as well. Because I feel like Nami could do a lot, you know, with the various techniques she has, with like the Mirage Tempo and stuff like that, which she did against Khalifa fight. I feel like giving her observation Haki would allow her to be more inventive and give her the much needed advantage she does need in her fights. So I don't know if Oda's actually ever going to address the fact that, you know, how are the Straw Hats going to be able to eventually go up against the Blackbeard pirates, you know, and win without Haki of any kind. I wonder if he's actually going to ever address that, or if he's eventually going to, you know, give them those abilities and then have them believably, you know, level them and scale them up to the point where they could take on foes more powerful than themselves. So that's kind of like one aspect of it. The other aspect is fuck. What was I going to say? Sorry, I just lost my train of thought. The other aspect, like the other criticism I've kind of seen. Quick aside before I get into this, I will say I have been kind of reveling in the fact a little bit that so many hardcore stans themselves are kind of like disappointed with how Oda's been, or with how Oda handled this chapter, and kind of like finally being like, oh, you know, or finally being like, you know, Big Mom's become a more convenient plot device that they wanted. They're kind of disappointed that Nami didn't get her fight and everything. It just made me really happy. Like, I just reveled in that a little bit. Just wanted to bring that up. But I guess we'll talk about Big Moms first before we finish off the Nami ulti stuff and like whether this is the end for them or whatnot. Again, this is something I've been harping on, like bringing up and reiterating repeatedly throughout all these videos. In that Big Mom could not have been anything but a plot device, because I know a lot of fans have gone into this arc with the expectation that, you know, Big Mom and Kaido are going down together, or, you know, it's going to be the fall of two emperors, etc., etc. And so, you know, they're kind of confused by how come Oda keeps sidelining Big Mom, or, you know, throwing her into these plot convenience situations and things like that. And that might also be because I've always been of the mind that Big Mom is going to get a redemption at some point. And so Oda's basically been kind of stalling because he knows that he can't wrap up her plot point, you know, at this stage of the story yet. But because of the serialized format of manga storytelling, and because of the fact that he's kind of made the decision to have her come to Wano, he can't really go back, you know, like fix his draft and be like, okay, you know, I changed my mind. Having Big Mom here complicates things way more than necessary. I'll just have her show up, you know, later at a later point when we're ready to conclude her arc. And because of that, I feel like, you know, he's stuck between a rock and a hard place, which he kind of put himself in that position where he has to have Big Mom kind of involved in the arc, I want to say, but he can't have her be defeated here, or, you know, have her do something that would negatively kind of impact her relationship to the Straw Hats at the later point when she does get her eventual redemption. So he kind of has to use her in these plot convenient ways, right? And try to, you know, minimize the impact that she has on the story. Which is why you end up with situations like this where, you know, she kind of ends up taking ulti down for Nami, supposedly. Or at least, you know, kind of weakening her so that Nami can believably kind of finally finish her when she does get back up. And I feel like this is an issue that could be easily solved if Oda just had more oversight and was given more breaks between arcs so that he could kind of flesh out and plot out his storylines a bit better rather than trying to fly by the seat of his pants. Because I think he was able to get away with it when the story was a little bit less complex. But the more elements he adds to it, the longer it keeps going on. I think he's finding it harder and harder to juggle all these disparate threads in a satisfying way. And I think we finally saw the culmination of that in this chapter. Like I said, the hardcore stands even are not happy with how he's handling it, and even they don't believe that, you know, there's going to be a satisfactory kind of ending for all parties involved within this. But I guess that's the one big advantage I have, because I have no emotional investment in any of these characters of the story at this point. I feel none of the disappointment. I'm just here to amuse myself. But yeah, I'm having a really good blast with this chapter. But yeah, I just want to bring that up. I guess the last salient point with regards to this is Ulti down for the count? I don't think for a second that she is. I think this is just a temporary kind of fix so that he can stall the plot until, certain pieces get to where they are, and then he can have Big Mom get pulled out of the picture to wherever the hell she's going to be going to next. Whether it's Olin, whether she gets thrown into the sea again, whether she falls in the Big Mom pirate ship, whatever. I guess we'll talk about the last point related to her when we get to the Kaido stuff at the end, because I think that'll fit in better with that. But yeah, I don't believe Ulti's down for the count. Which brings us to the stuff again, this feels like filler for lack of a better word, more so than anything else. Because does anyone really give a shit about Zeus, or like his being like the neglected child of Big Mom, or is like striving to be accepted or whatever? Like, this feels like Oda just wanted to force in something to pad out this chapter, and it's just more so amusing to me than actually like emotional in any way. Like we'll talk about, I guess, in the form that it goes in, because I'm trying to think about how best to kind of talk about this. Because again, I guess the most obvious thing to talk about is something I addressed again last chapter. Is I never understood the thought process of the fandom where they're always arguing or justifying that Nami would get Zeus, that he'd be her new, Zeus was always going to be a power up for Nami, the same way the raid suit was for Shitji. And it's very kind of obvious that Oda at this point couldn't find ways to do this naturally, where he kind of realized that there would be a power disparity between the Straw Hats and the foes they faced, and so he needed a way to kind of even the odds for them. And so he gives them dumbass power-ups like Nami getting Zeus to make her Thunderbolt stronger, and Shitji getting, Germa technology so he can be, a fucking sex pest. And he can fly and have his defensive capabilities upped and things like that. But the thing that never made sense to me with this whole idea, now he's gonna get Zeus, blah blah blah, is something that gets addressed in this chapter where Big Mom acknowledges that Zeus has a portion of her soul in her, and as we see with the other homies, they have an undying loyalty to Big Mom. So it never made sense as to why or how Zeus would be able to override that loyalty to her and just choose to be able to serve Nami. Because as Big Mom kind of demonstrates in this chapter, she can literally rip out the soul that she gave to him, kind of back to her, and kind of just make him back from regular Thundercloud again. So unless Big Mom ended up just giving Zeus to Nami, it never made sense as to how Nami would just get, how with Big Mom remaining an antagonist, Nami would just be able to use Zeus against her, as an upgrade or weapon power-up. And, to put on my theorist cap for a second, this kind of relates to broader, speculation theories I've done that we, again, haven't gotten answers for with regards to inanimate objects and their souls and, how the whole thing works. Because I think the question I have is, when you put a soul into an object, when Big Mom rips out, takes someone's soul for her, tax payment, whatever, puts it into one of her homies on the island, is the personality in that homie an aspect of the person that the soul was ripped from, or is it an aspect of the object that it was put into? Since that object now has sentience, are we seeing what that object's personality is like, and the soul is basically just acting like a battery for its sentience? I think that's the question I have, and a lot of gets confounded and confused with how Otis kind of portrayed Zeus's relationship with Nami and Big Mom, because if it is an aspect of Big Mom's soul, how is it able to defy her, or to turn its back on her, and like change his allyship and things like that. I think those are questions that Oda should have done a better job of like addressing or at least hinting at, which is why I think a lot of this, supposed like emotional turmoil that Zeus is feeling doesn't really land with the impact I think Oda expects it to. I just had a tangential thought, because here's the thing, like, a lot of other people have pointed this out as well, that when Nami feeds Zeus the lightning bolts after, Big Mom's apparently ripped up his soul and, like, tosses the dredges to Hera. Hera chomps down on the end of Nami's climb-up baton, along with, the Thunderballs, along with whatever's left of Zeus. And so a lot of people speculate, what if Zeus just kind of gets absorbed into the tip of Nami's climb attack and he's able to survive in there and make sure that Hera isn't able to actually, like, absorb or eat him. And that's how he survives, because now this, like, the portion of his soul that has Big Mom is so small, whatever, she just doesn't, like, notice him or whatever. But the other thought I had was related to Jinbei. Because as we know, like, Big Mom's soul powers don't work on you if you are not afraid of her, or at least you don't have like a strong emotional reaction to her. She's not able to like manipulate or grab your soul. So I wonder if Zeus, finally standing up for himself and growing his own cojones, means that he was also able to, for at least a portion of it, defy Big Mom's abilities and retain some of his soul. But like I said, that kind of just confuses the whole relationship with what exactly a homie is and like how Big Mom's powers work with that. Again, this feels like Oda's just gonna be kind of manipulating and playing with the rules as he sees fit for whatever's convenient. It is what it is, but yeah, I don't buy for a second that Zeus is alive. We'll see what the explanation ends up being for how he actually survived. I want to bring that up. One more thing, I guess, before we get to the Kaido Luffy stuff. I'm not really going to comment a lot on the Kid Big Mom stuff, because again, I don't really give a shit. This is not Kid's not taking out Big Mom. I don't think Big Mom's taking out Kid. I think this is just going to be, again, filler distraction until Oda gets the plot to wherever he wants it to be. It is whatever. We'll see if anything amusing comes out of it, if we see any other of Kid's abilities apart from just making a giant hammer smacking shit with it. But I saw a lot of fans trying to justify the mothering mode from last chapter by saying like, oh, Big Mom this chapter has been acting way more consistently with how she's been characterized, and that means that mothering mode wasn't plot convenient because this chapter she was willing to put Tama in danger because she wasn't appreciative of her benevolence and her charity and all that. I 100% agree that Big Mom has been acting more in line with how she's been characterized, back in Whole Cake Island, etc. That doesn't mean that mothering mode still wasn't a plot convenient device. Like the fact that Oda came up with a name for it, and the fact that we'd never seen it mentioned before, still makes it a plot device. The fact that she's finally back consistently acting consistent with her character now, doesn't kind of, mean that what came before is kind of just suddenly now justified. I think this is like one of the more enduring problems with how the fandom approaches criticism of the series, is there's always this justification like, oh, Oda has a plan, we'll eventually get a satisfying answer to everything. And because they have to believe in that so strongly, you have to believe that there's this grand, web of, Oda's all plot lines that he's got, he's like this puppet master just manipulating everything perfectly. The belief that, everything has to have a satisfying ending, or else, oh no, this might mean that Oda's not, as great as everyone thought he was. Feels like, basically makes fans, like, react harshly to criticism. I'm sorry, I can't find the right words for it. Like, react harshly to criticism like that, and I really dislike, the kind of mindset where it's like, oh, you can't criticize something in the chapter until everything plays out, because then the justification will come from everything else, because it's basically like moving the goalpost, where they'll never be satisfied, or they'll never accept any criticism you have, because there'll always be some justification for why it's invalid. But that brings us to the end of the chapter. And the thing that... So there's a couple of things with regards to this. I guess the first thing I'll talk about, I was not surprised by this. Like, my initial reaction to seeing this was literally, oh, fucking finally. Because this is something I've been saying needs to happen for the longest time, and I've always been of the mind that, if this hadn't happened, if Luffy literally had, after unlocking Conquerors, had been able to go toe to toe with Kaido, he'd have a few upsets here or there, but with a little bit of help, he would have been able to take him out, no problem. I'd have called bullshit on that. So on the one hand, I'm like, all right, finally, getting to the point where this story could finally start to get interesting. And that was immediately tempered by the fact, like, all right, because this is happening at the end of the chapter, as an obvious cliffhanger that Oda's pulled 1,000 times before, where things look bleak, and like, oh no, stuff serious, like mistakes and consequences, and the fact he immediately undercuts it the chapter after, like the prime example being end of Whole Cake Island, where the Sunny was supposedly destroyed. And the next chapter he pulled the bullshit of like, oh no, they pulled it underwater so fast and replaced it with a decoy. Like, I cannot discount the possibility of some bullshit like that happening in the next chapter, even though Luffy's seemingly knocked out, falling to his death or whatever. So I wanted to say, I'm cautiously optimistic about where the story's going to go from here. But instead, I think I'm just going to say I'm cautious about where the story's going to go from here, because it could go in very potentially interesting directions, and it could also not. So it really is impossible to kind of tell until we do see the next chapter and kind of see what the progression is going to be. That's it before getting to the analysis. My two theories or takes on what is going to happen. And I feel like this is 50-50. One, I feel like we'll finally get a reveal of Yamato's Devil Fruit. Yamato swoops down, grabs Luffy, rescues him, takes him back up. So that's possibility number one. Possibility number two, and I don't know if I mentioned this in last week's video, I don't think I did, but last week's video when Momo was mentioned, like, oh, there's only two voices up on the roof, felt like an odd thing to specifically point out and mention, but like, especially to us as the readers, like, we know there's no one else on the roof anymore. Let me check quickly. Did Momo actually mention last chapter that he knew there was no one else on the roof either? Sorry, just give me a second really quick as I check that out. The reason I was thinking like that was odd specifically was it might have been foreshadowing this moment, because now Momo will be like, oh no, there's only one voice on the roof. And then because, Kaido's whole thing about being like, oh, I can still hear your voice even when he's been... Yeah, so he says he's the same as earlier weakened but still well. However, there are only two voices now. Yeah. So the other thought I had regarding that is because, Momo's apparently in tune with like what's going on with the voice and everything, because we know that even when he's unconscious, you can kind of sense Luffy's spirit or his haki or whatever. It feels like Momo would be the best position to then notice that, oh shit, Luffy's been knocked off the roof, I have to go rescue him. And I feel like this would be a good opportunity for Momo to have some much needed kind of development and focus and growth, because like this is something other people point out that I forgot. Like, Momo has a fear of heights, like we all know this, and because Onigashima was like floating, thousands of miles in the sky above the sea, on the one hand, like that would be one aspect of the development is Momo finally overcoming his fear of heights to be able to, you know, fly down, rescue Luffy, drag him back up, you know, overcome that fear he has of that thing. And the second one idea I had with regards to like any development you'd have is the entire arc's also kind of been leaning heavily on this idea that, you know, Momo doesn't feel like he's going to be as good a leader as his father. He's not as inspirational as his father, as inspirational a figure as his father was. And so with Kaido's whole speech about, you know, people never give up hope, they don't lose hope, blah blah blah. If Oda's actually going to commit to Luffy being knocked out for a good chunk of time, and it's not going to be another, you know, rooftop situation where he's like, oh, we got slammed with one of Kaido's strongest attacks, and he's like, oh, I'm out of hockey for 10 minutes, and he literally just recovered, you know, within the span of a few seconds. If he's actually going to commit to that, and like, I have a thematic point connected to this as well, I'm not just rambling randomly. If he's going to commit to that, I think that would also be then a good moment if you see at least the allies, like the samurai allies' faith starting to waver, because they, you know, they saw Luffy and Udon, they saw him kind of resisting Queen's Plague and everything. The Scabbards saw, you know, his confidence and everything when he's facing off against Kaido. If we see that starting to waver, see their strength starting to waver, it would be a good opportunity for Momo to then step up as a leader, you know, temporarily, and take Luffy's place to kind of re-inspire them again. You know, kind of playing off the whole, if a child can, you know, stand up for himself, if a child is willing to fight, you know, what's wrong with the adults. So that could be a few interesting directions that this could be taken. But I also do have actually one more theory before I kind of get into this last stuff. Sorry, I just remembered this and forgot about it. I do wonder if Kaido went into his awakened form briefly, and that's how he's able to smash Luffy off the roof. This could also just be like this. Also, something I'll address in a bit. This could also just be an inconsistency with how Oda's handled power scaling and everything else. But given the fact that Luffy seemed to be able to go pretty much toe to toe with him, you know, not being in any of his gears, not having pulled out Gear 4 at any point, just using basically Conqueror's Haki, even when Kaido was in his hybrid form. Unless Kaido was for some reason holding back, you know, his full strength, and then once Luffy unlocked Conqueror, he's like, oh fine, I'm gonna go to bat. Or unless, you know, I've seen people other fans pause that maybe Luffy ran out of Conqueror's Haki, and that's how come Kaido was able to land like a finishing blow and send him flying. Barring any like of that, I wonder if Kaido, you know, Kaido's little speech about like being like overexcited and having gotten too worked up, I wonder if that is a hint that he went briefly in his awakened form, and the power from that allowed him to overwhelm Luffy and send him flying. Because this kind of ties back to my comment with Ulti, and I guess tangentially Kaido as well, like videos ago, where I talked about how, you know, Oda's penchant for wanting to keep women looking sexy all the time. Ulti's hybrid form looked a lot like Marco's hybrid form, like where there's only like the extremities were transformed, and it didn't feel like a full, you know, combination hybrid like we've seen with Page One or we've seen with X Drake. And I speculate on, like, you know, whether that was a sign of like, you know, Devil Fruit mastery and control, where you can transform select body parts without having to transform the entire thing into it, and whether they were holding back for a reason. And given that we know, like, given that we know Kaido was on Punk Hazard at some point, given that we know he was most likely experimented on, given Queen's ties to Vegapunk, given that both Dressrosa and Whole Cake Island, you know, started dropping hints and talking about, you know, Devil Fruit Awakening, you know, what shape it takes, like, you know, having users that have awakened Devil Fruits, and given that, you know, awakened zones have been kind of the earliest hints we've seen of this, back with first Monster Chopper, then the Impel Down awakened Jailer Beast, I feel like it'd be a massively missed opportunity to not showcase or introduce awakened Zoan users in an arc centered around, a crew of Zoan users and led by a captain who's supposedly a creature, monster, whatever. And this has always been something I've kind of been keeping in the back of my mind. A speculation is, are Kaido and his crew awakened, but for some reason, they're kind of withholding that as the ace in their sleeve, either because they can't fully control it yet, or, it's like the Chopper situation where it's like, it eats up too much stamina, and if you do it, like, it reduces your lifespan, whatever, like, there's a reason they're withholding it. So, to me, that would be, I guess, the easiest, I'm looking for the right word, the only one that comes to mind is the easiest explanation for why, or how, I guess, Kai or Ulti and Page won't get back up is they go into their awakened forms. So awakened Zone users have a ton of endurance and durability, and they're able to kind of recover really quickly from, really devastating blows and punches and stuff like that. So I wonder if we're going to get the reveal of that finally. That all said, the final kind of like criticism here, I'll try to keep this short because the video I think is running on a little long. Apart from the fact, it's kind of a cliffhanger technique that Oda's pulled before, being one of the reasons like the Luffy getting knocked off scene didn't really have much of an impact, is, again, this is something I've talked about before in multiple videos, and last week I even considered whether I should do like another video talking about, whether Oda is going to actually deliver on this thematic narrative that he's hinted at throughout Wano, but he hasn't really delivered on. But I figured I'll just talk about it quickly here rather than doing a pointless other separate video on it. And that is, it's again related to Kaido's kind of speech about, hope, how people can't give up hope, and like the thing he doesn't really name with, with what he wants to do is he wants to incite despair in, the samurai and their allies. He wants to break their spirits. And this is something that's been continually kind of hinted at, but not really acted on by Oda throughout this arc, where there's been a throughput line of like, Kaido likes to break spirits. He gets captains from other crews, he breaks their spirits, so they acknowledge him as the one true ruler, and then, they join his crew, have the whole Kaido supremacy kind of thing. And we have Queen and King be like, we like to torture people, I like to experiment, blah, 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 blah. And I don't know if this is because Oda's just unwilling to commit to that, commit to the level he would need to for the Straw Hats to be beaten down that much before they kind of bounce back, or if this is just some kind of like narrative oversight because he just kind of lost track of, because he's introduced so many elements into this arc. But we haven't really seen a singular moment in this arc where the Straw Hats where there's even a hint from the Straw Hats that, their spirits are wavering or about to break, or there's despair or like doubt in Luffy's ability to win. Because even the first time when he was knocked out by the club, sent to Udon, after taking one hit from Kaido, when he was in Gear 4 in his most powerful form, the Straw Hats' attitudes the next day were like very blasé. They were just like eating soba and being like, oh, Luffy's in jail, no big deal, like, he'll always win and get out of it, blah blah blah. And that's a tonal inconsistency that's kind of been carried on throughout this arc. I don't know like what Oda's really trying to achieve with this chapter, like with this cliffhanger, I guess. Because if it's about, subverting expectations, if the intention was always that, you're gonna build up a sense of overconfidence, you know, so that eventually when the moment does arrive that, you know, the reversal happens and turns out the confidence comes crumbling down, Luffy gets knocked off, blah blah blah, etc. I feel like that, for that to work effectively and not feel jarring, you would need to have like an undercurrent of the best word I can think of is wrongness kind of going through the wrong. Like, there should have been an undercurrent throughout the arc of the feeling like, you know, things are going too well and there's gonna have to be some kind of reversal happening. And have, like, I don't feel like the tone of the chapters and the way that the fandom has reacted to or perceived them has really sustained that belief, you know, that there has been an undercurrent of like, oh, you know, stuff has to go wrong. Because there have been a few fans that have been of that mindset, more so because of, you know, the adherence to the idea of the kabuki narrative structure, where everyone's like, oh, Act 3 has, you know, when people Google it, they're like, oh, Act 3 has to have a moment of tragedy. That's a staple in kabuki plays. We're going to have a moment of tragedy. So I feel like because a lot of them have really strictly adhered to that idea, they have felt like this reversal has been coming. But I don't feel like the narrative has really supported that. So I think that's why this moment really didn't land with the impact it did. Like, that's why I feel like, you know, I'm more cautious than anything else. Because with last week's chapter, my feelings regarding the arc were that it was going to end. My feelings was like the arc was going to reach its climax pretty soon, and that we were in the final fight, and like, you know, Luffy having unlocked Conquerors would be like the final step to his defeat of Kaido. So, you know, now seeing that there's a potential reversal coming is a little bit unexpected, because I didn't think Oda was actually going to commit to having that, to doing that at some point. So yeah, I don't like it. I'm trying to find the proper words for it, but I can't really think of anything else except their tonal inconsistency. So yeah, I don't know. We'll have to wait and see to see if Oda actually does deliver on this chapter or not. Because if he does, if, you know, Luffy does get knocked out for a while, if we flash to the other Straw Hats fights and we see that, you know, they are starting to lose ground, if it does look like things are starting to go badly for them, then maybe then I'll do another analysis video kind of talking about this more in depth, with kind of cleaner thoughts, but we'll see. Yeah, I think I'll cut it off there. I hope I got all my points across. I don't want to get ramble on too much. So like I said, it has potential. I'm cautious about Oda's history of how he handles cliffhangers like this chapter are not making me optimistic about the chance it's going to end up well. So we'll see what the next chapters brings. There's going to be a break next week. So it's going to be 2 weeks before the next chapter. I'm going to we'll see. I'm kind of debating whether I should do a live reaction to the next one or not. I'll think about it. Maybe do a poll on Twitter before deciding that. But as always, I hope you all enjoyed this video. As always, if you like my content, please do like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. Till next time, this is Ash. I will talk to you all later.